All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating claim from our source material. We're looking at a hidden numerical correlation, a pattern buried right in the structural arrangement of the Quran. It's like finding a hidden layer of code where you least expect it. You know, usually when we're reading a historical or religious text, we are entirely focused on the words, right? The narratives, the moral lessons. But our source asks us to shift gears and look through a mathematical lens. The argument here is that the Quran features a highly specific structural alignment. Basically, the physical arrangement and numbering of a chapter, which is known as a surah, is said to perfectly correspond to the length of the specific story it contains. So, in other words, the chapter number isn't just some arbitrary index or table of contents. According to this analysis, it's actually a deliberate numerical mirror, reflecting the exact first count of the narrative inside it. Okay, to prove this, the source offers a very specific case study. We're looking at Surah Al-Kahf, which translates to the cave. The speaker pinpoints the exact moment this famous story begins, kicking off with this opening verse. Or have you thought that the companions of the cave and the inscription were, among our signs, a wonder? So this right here is our starting boundary. This is exactly where the clock, or I guess the verse counter, begins ticking for the specific historical narrative. But just as every story has a beginning, it obviously has to have an end. The speaker marks the exact conclusion of the narrative with this ending verse. And they remained in their cave for 300 years and exceeded by 9. Say, Allah is most knowing of how long they remained. Now, according to the source's analysis, this is the definitive, natural stopping point for the narrative of the youths who slept in the cave. The story just naturally wraps up right here, with the final tally of the years they spent sleeping. So we now have our two bookends, right? A definitive starting verse and a definitive ending verse. That brings us to the pivotal question. If we were to manually count every single verse sandwiched between these two boundaries, literally from the moment the companions are introduced to the moment their time in the cave is finalized, what is the exact total? Really think about that for a second. In a text compiled over centuries, what are the odds of finding a deliberate, precise structural pattern here? Well, the answer, according to the source, is exactly 18. There are precisely 18 verses that tell the entire story of the companions of the cave, from that introductory question all the way to the final declaration of how long they slept. 18 verses. But why is that specific number so significant? Let's connect the dots here. If we look at the historical index of the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, the chapter we've been discussing this whole time, is organized as the 18th chapter of the book. Now compare that to the internal verse count of the story we just looked at, which is exactly 18 verses long. Chapter 18, 18 verses. It's a perfect match. The source presents this amazing structural correlation to argue that the arrangement of the text is intricately and deliberately designed. It's literally linking the macro structure of the chapter numbers directly to the microstructure of the narrative lengths. Looking at this precise alignment, the source concludes with the phrase, Subhanallah, which translates to glory be to God, expressing a really profound sense of awe at this pattern. And we're sharing this sentiment impartially just to show how these hidden numerical correlations are received by the people who study them. To them, it's not just dry math. It's an intricate, awe-inspiring structural puzzle. And honestly, it really leaves you with something fascinating to ponder. How often do we read our most revered texts, focusing entirely on the words, while remaining completely blind to the hidden mathematical frameworks that might be holding the entire structure together?